Andy, could you say a few words, please?
Well, thank you, Jason. David Cameron failed to win an outright majority because people couldn't identify with him. They didn't trust him. I can give Labour something the Tories don't have. A leader that ordinary people can relate to, whose background is like theirs, but who has the capacity and the ability to inspire. And I will do that by addressing causes that are close to Labour hearts from my own life experience. So I will talk about the ordinary kids without connections who still find it too hard to get on in this country. I will talk about how unfair it is that families at the bottom often find the odds stacked against them. And I will talk about taking away the fear of care costs from older people with a national care service. This is a big idea in the best traditions of Labour. It could do in this century what the NHS did in the last. It is an idea that has the potential to put the purpose and the pride back into the hearts of Labour members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy Burnham.
Well, I think I can show to you that I've got good judgment. In the last Parliament, people will remember the times of crisis that our party faced, when we looked as though we were about to pull each other apart. And I would put it to you that at those moments, I always showed good judgment and made the right call and ensured that Labour stuck together and stayed together and in the end went on to deliver 13 years of government that changed this country for the better. So I would put it to you that I have the right judgment and the right instincts to lead this party and this country. I just want to say that the Labour Party is going to need somebody who can unify. I think that is so important in this period going forward. We're going to need to bring the Labour family, all parts of the Labour family, back together. I'm not going to be in the business in this campaign of disowning our record or our past. I'm proud of what we did in government. But one of the mistakes we made, by defining ourselves as New Labour, we left good people in the Labour Party and the wider Labour movement excluded at the start. They didn't feel a part of the government at the beginning, and consequently, they felt no joy or ownership in the government's achievements. So the next leader of the Labour Party needs to bring that wider Labour family back together. I'm Labour through and through. I've never had time for factional politics. I served Gordon loyally, I served Tony loyally. But the next leader needs to bring that whole wider Labour family back together so we can be once again the unifying force on the British left for everybody who wants a fairer society with health, wealth and life chances evenly spread.
Thank you. I think
Andy's right.
Well, I mean, like Ed, we were making difficult decisions within our departments. I'd already pared back the NHS IT programme before the election. My old department, DCMS, well, obviously that's going to be hard to say in this period that should be funded at exactly the same level. But I would say rather than everyone going for a sacrificial lamb, all departments should bear some of the responsibility here, and we do it across the board. But if I could make a point, Ed made a very important point a moment ago about saying admitting mistakes is not about disowning the record, and he's right to say that. And the public are only going to tune into us again when they hear us talking about those mistakes. And I think rather than just debating 6 billion or the decisions in the last year, I think we've got to go back to the start of New Labour. And it was right to position New Labour as pro-business, and we should never, ever move off that territory. But the problem we began to have over time was it looked like we put big business before people, and it looked at times like we were seduced by power, wealth and glamour. And when the credit crunch hit and the recession hit, the public out there thought we were acting to save bankers rather than ordinary people and ordinary savers. And we found that we couldn't make an argument to the public anymore about what we were trying to do. And that, I believe, showed how we had lost our way over time. And we've got to understand that and learn from that if we're going to find our way back and regain people's ear and people's trust.
Before we ask the next question, we must move on. There's many questions. Ed Miliband wants to come in.
David and Ed before him was making a very important point, I think, about involving people in policy making and doing policy making differently in the party. Today, people are looking for instant access to the debate, and we've got to really understand this. And they want real politics. When I can remember what got me into politics was the theatre of Kinnock and Hatton at Labour Party conference in Bournemouth, slugging it out on the floor. And I think reforming how our party conference works is a really important part of it, so we have a real debate again. And Walter Wolfgang is here this evening, just spotted him in the crowd. We've got to That gave me the thought. We've got to bring down the curtain on stage management in politics, and let's get politics feeling real again. Proper debates at annual conference so that we can really involve our members in policy development.
We're going to have to move on because we're running behind. I've got a lot of questions. Sorry.
We've also got to acknowledge that this is territory where Labour members, Labour MPs feel uncomfortable. We all collectively have a tendency not to want to talk about it. But that often is the very worst response, because then it leaves a vacuum that others exploit. And we can't come out of this general election and say that it wasn't the biggest issue that was raised with us on the street and on the doorstep. It was in many parts of the country, possibly not everywhere, but in many parts of the country, it was. So we have to think through our response. Actually, I'm pleased to see Tony McNulty here tonight, because he did brilliant work to get the asylum system working again and to get real rigour and discipline into the system. And that's what we need if we're to have a policy that Labour members can communicate. But when it comes to European migration, we've got to be clear that British people have benefited from free movement in times past. My dad worked in Germany, in Ireland as a contract worker. So if it was good enough for us back then in the 1980s and 90s, it's good enough for others to come and enjoy the benefits of our growing economy. But Diane is right. It's not about people coming in. The issue is the effect it has on people's jobs, people's access to housing. So Labour has got to address those issues, ensure that we are taking action on agency workers. We did drag our feet on that issue, and that is a real issue for many people out there. It's addressing those issues so that we then have a clear and compelling line and story that Labour activists can use on the street with confidence, and so that, in my view, is the best way to take on the BNP at a local level. We should staunchly and vigorously defend the big principle of free movement of people around Europe. And Ed was right to say that, because British people have benefited. It's been a two-way street. People are today working elsewhere in the European Union. But what we should have done is speak out against things that fail a basic fairness test in the eyes of people. And I would have in that category...
What would there have been?
I would have in that category people sending child benefit back to other countries where the children aren't living here. Now, I think in the eyes of most people, that fails a basic fairness test in terms of the British welfare state. You should make your contribution, but when you need it, then you can draw out. And I think we should have said to the European Union, we're going to need to change these benefit rules to uphold the bigger principle that we should defend free movement. And it was failing to speak out on things that really got to people, and they thought that is just not right, that then we began to lose the bigger argument about defending the very important principle of the free movement of people around Europe. As I answer this question, I am very conscious indeed of the banner behind me. But when you hear what I say, I think there's probably not a great likelihood that I will appear as a spokesman on the news if indeed they clip this. I just want to bring it down, if I might, to the personal level. I don't think we know what the world will be like in 2050, and I do think about that when I look at my 3 children. It's impossible to say. I think it'll be a very uncertain world indeed, and in that context, unilateral disarmament doesn't appeal to me much right now. I'm not saying that it never will, but it doesn't appeal to me much right now. I think you said in the question, time to rethink the project, and I will be open, perhaps, to that. Is there a partnership with France that we could explore to bring down the cost, or with other nuclear states? Can we do more to build on the recent announcement by the United States and Russia? Is there more we can do to put momentum and impetus into the multilateral disarmament talks? Now, all of those things do appeal, but I have to be honest and say, right now, to take a big step into the unknown, I don't think we know enough about how the world may develop in this century to be able to take such a step right now.
Diane, before you come in,
I've said many times it was the toughest decision in politics I've ever made, and what may not be immediately apparent to everybody is that, I'm sure I'm not alone, many of us have agonised about it ever since and questioned whether we did the right thing. With hindsight, of course, there are things that should have been done differently with the reconstruction and the aftermath and stabilising the country. And, incidentally, there are probably things that should have been done differently in terms of public opinion and how that was handled. So Diane is right to say that. But I do not step away from the fundamental decision. Let me explain to you why. Because I believe the issue of weapons of mass destruction and human rights were intrinsically linked. On the eve of the vote, Burnham came to Westminster, and I will always, for the rest of my life, remember a meeting that we had with him. And he said, understand this, that the only way Saddam maintains his iron grip over our people is because he maintains the pretense that he has weapons of mass destruction. So none of them feel they can lift a finger or do anything to rise up against him. And where I think Ed is wrong is that if the inspectors had been given more time and then the pretense was taken away and the world and everybody could see that he didn't have them and he couldn't maintain the pretense any longer, make no mistake, there would have been a bloody civil war in that country as people rose up and sought to remove him and his acolytes. Now, I don't want to put it to you that there are simple, easy answers, but because of what we did, the country has a hope today of a better future. And I think we mustn't forget that young people from this country went out to serve for that cause. I still believe it was an important cause, and we shouldn't disrespect them and what they did to bring, I believe, hope of a better future to that country.
So no apology. Ed Balls?
I think
Well, I think this election really exposed some of the weaknesses of the current electoral system. I think some people felt a real difficulty when it came to the ballot paper in the constituency that they were in about what to do. And I think it really did bring that home. But I would just put to you, let's not talk ourselves into a default position that we're all enthusiastically rushing towards AV as the solution. We do need to take a moment to consider, is this in the best interests of the Labour Party in the long term? Now, I believe there is a case for electoral reform. It was loud and clear to me at the election time. But let's just take a moment to consider what this might do to the Labour Party's interests in the long term. And you do have to think about that before wholeheartedly and collectively we embrace a new position. And I don't think the Labour Party has actually gone through that debate yet. It's not looked at all of the details, all of the ramifications that it could have across the country. I am edging towards it, but I'd just say let's exercise some caution here, because we do want to have Labour governments for the rest of this century, and I just would say let's fully understand, let's majority Labour governments for the rest of this century, and let's just fully understand what the implications are of alternative vote before we rush headlong into accepting a position at the referendum. Well, we're only a month on from a difficult election for the Labour Party, but I've actually found the last month quite heartening, and I found this meeting heartening this evening, because Labour is beginning to debate its future without recrimination or introspection, and that's no small prize. And I think all of us should, I would say, a debt of thanks to Gordon Brown for what he did to take the country through difficult times and to leave the Labour Party in this position when we can come back. And what I would want to say to us, all of us this evening, the differences, opinions we might have, the different candidates we want to support, all of us, all five here, and all of you, let's commit to win next time, because I think we can win next time, but we'll only win if we go through this process, and if this process is good for the Labour Party and it helps us come back stronger, and I believe that it will. I don't believe anyone specific lost us the election. I think it's more fundamental. People out there had lost sight of what kind of people we are and what we stand for, and we have to face up to that fact. Labour is nothing if it's not about breaking down elites, but we spent too long as a government courting elites, and we left the impression that we were putting big business before people. So I would say to you all, if you want to put people back at the heart of the People's Party and be part of my campaign, if you want a society with a fairer spread of health, wealth and life chances, be part of my campaign. If you're not New Labour, Next Labour, but our Labour, be part of my campaign. Thank you very much. So if that speaks to you, join the Labour Party and join my campaign.